David Freiburger here. I am on the quest for 1,000 horsepower naturally aspirated. I'm going to do it with a 582 cubic inch big block Chevy, and I want to tell you about my Dart tall deck aluminum block because I am in love with it. This is my first aluminum big block and it makes me super happy. It does have that 10,200 deck height. The stock big block Chevy is 9,800. And the reason that I did that is so that I've got some expansion for the future and also so that I can use this particular combination of components, which is a K1 Technologies 6.7 inch connecting rod and a custom diamond piston that has a 1.303 inch compression height. Getting back into this engine block, there's a few other things that it's got that are not your normal street stuff. First of all, it has lifter bores that are bushed for a 0.904 diameter roller lifter, which is larger than your typical big block Chevy. It's actually a Chrysler Hemi or wedge size. And by using that larger diameter lifter, you get a larger diameter roller, and therefore you use a camshaft that has a different load profile that can be more aggressive. Now the other thing is this block has been bored for a 55 millimeter cam core. Again, larger than your typical big block Chevy. The reason for that is when you're building this kind of giant camshaft and this kind of RPM, you've got a lot of valve spring pressure. The camshaft can actually flex. By running a larger core, you get a more rigid camshaft and it leads to better reliability and performance. And so Dart was able to supply this thing bored for that 55 millimeter cam, but importantly, I didn't want roller cam bearings, which is super common in a build like this. This actually has Babbitt bearings in it. It's going to be a little bit more streetable. Personally, I fear needle bearings inside my engine. That's a big reason why I did that. So another thing that was really important about going with the Dart engine block is that I was able to get it prepped, fully machined straight from Dart, ready to assemble. This makes the whole process way easier. Because they knew what piston I was going to run and what my ring package was, they're able to bore and hone this thing perfectly for my combination. It's already completely dialed in between the hone job. It's also got deburring. It's a line honed, it's got clearance for the stroke, it's ready to assemble. And that was a huge factor for me on that thing. Now the real key to the horsepower that I'm looking for is this cylinder head. I'm never gonna make it to 1,000 easily with a conventional 24-degree head. See, a big block Chevy stock is 25 degrees on the intake valve, and then aftermarket typically is 24. This is a 20-degree intake valve angle, therefore flattening out that intake valve for more flow, and it's going to be the key to just bumping me over that 1,000 horsepower number. Now, this cylinder head is part of the race series. It's their 451cc intake runner, and it's got 160 on the exhaust. It's really a crossover between the more basic 24-degree heads that you can get from Dart, like the Pro 1, and the Big Chief stuff or the spread port stuff. The advantage to this is it's still a race cylinder head. It's got significantly higher performance than the 24-degree, but I can still use a regular cast aluminum intake designed for a regular old big block Chevy, in this case for a tall deck. And so that intake face surface is the key to keeping costs down and making this simpler, and honestly, to making the engine just look like a regular old big block Chevy. I told Dart exactly what I was trying to do here, and they set me up with titanium intake valves because the intake valve is a 2.4 inch diameter. That is a big hankin' valve, and when it's in stainless steel, it's so heavy that we might see some difficulties with valve control, getting it past that 7,500 RPM point so that we can run the thing past its power peak on shift recovery. On the exhaust side, it's a 1.8 inch valve, and we ordered up custom Inconel. Typically, you would do that for a boosted application or for big nitrous, and it's one of those things where they just know that I'm probably going to do that in the future, and so they set me up with Inconel. Really importantly on this cylinder head, it's got 97cc combustion chambers. A typical big block Chevy, whether it's aftermarket or OE with an open chamber, is going to be 118 to 121cc. The problem with that is when you go to make a piston and you're trying to get 14.5 to 14.71 compression, which was my goal, you end up with a giant dome to match a giant chamber. In this case, the small 97cc chamber means that I told Diamond Pistons what I was doing, and they were able to custom shape a dome at only 23 cc's. It's nice and flat. It creates better flame travel across the piston than the big old dome that you would typically need. So that's a huge advantage to this cylinder head. Lastly, one of the other great things about the Dart Custom program is you can tell them what you're doing, and in this case with the camshaft specs, and they were able to set me up with the valve springs and retainers that I needed to achieve the RPM and the lift numbers that I wanted to get, making sure that I won't get into coil bind or valve float. So that's sort of my thought about the bones of why I'm putting together this 582. As I move on, you're going to see us adding more and more things like valve train and the custom cam, the tunnel ram and all that stuff. And eventually, I will have it on the dyno with that quest for 1,000 horsepower. If I got to be honest, I think it's got to make significantly more than that, right? We'll find out coming up as I build this brutal Dart 582.